This is Ambassador John W. McDonald, founder and chairman and CEO of the Institute for Multi-Track Diplomacy. I was a U.S. diplomat for 40 years, and from 67, the next 8 years, I was assigned to the UN Bureau at the State Department here in Washington, D.C. Because I've been interested in development over the years, I was very concerned about the growth of the population in certain parts of the world, and the fact that nobody seemed to be focusing on population control, basically. So I saw an opportunity in 1969. The government of Denmark sent a check for $500,000 to the Secretary General of the United Nations to use family planning and population. But he looked around the UN system and there was nobody involved with that subject whatsoever. He didn't know quite what to do with the money, so he gave it to the population division of the Secretariat in New York, which is concerned about numbers, and that's all they do, is keep track of growth around the world. Well, I heard about that and I thought maybe this was an opportunity for me to make a difference. So I had an informal meeting with a new arrival at the USAID here in Washington, D.C. He was a Swede, and he was had just been hired to work on population issues. And his first project was to send 50 jeeps to Turkey with the hope that the doctors who got the jeeps would go out into villages and talk about family planning, which is a pretty indirect way to focus on that issue. But I told him my idea, and he said he would support it. So I went to the General Assembly that fall, and I made a speech in which I directed my remarks to the Secretary General. And I said basically, Mr. Secretary General, you've given $500,000 to the population division, but that's not really what the government of Denmark wanted to happen to the money. So if you would transfer by internal order responsibility for family planning and population to the UN Development Program in New York, the U.S. will give $1 million to the UNDP to focus on family planning and population. And then I waited to see what would happen. It took about 4 weeks when I learned that the Secretary General had issued an internal memorandum transferring responsibility from the population division to the UN Development Program, which at that point was headed by an American, the former president of Studebaker Automobile. And I thought I'd done my bit because I gave the money to the UNDP. A few weeks later, the head of UNDP called me up and said, McDonald, we got your $1 million because the Swede had come through, but we don't know what to do with it either. He said, so I'm setting you up as head of a 6-person committee. 5 other people are from developing countries to come to New York and sit down, the 6 of you together, and to figure out what to do with that money. So I said, okay. And we set a date and I went to New York. And we sat around for some time talking and discussing issues. And then I finally got a bright idea. I said, why don't we create the UNFPA, United Nations Fund for Population Activities, and put it under the UNDP, but separate from the UNDP, with a separate board of directors from the UNDP, in contributions only from government going into the population fund, not to the UNDP. And turned that into the head of UNDP, and again thought my job was done. 6 weeks later, I got a call from the head of UNDP. He said, I've just come from a round the world tour and I've interviewed 6 candidates at the Assistant Secretary General level, which is what you'd set up, which is the political level, not the career level. And I said, that's wonderful. You had talked to 6 people in 6 countries. And he said, yes. And I said, congratulations. And he said, well, I have a problem. I said, what's that? He said, one of the 6 is in my outer office. He thinks I hired him. I said, did you? He said, no, I hadn't made up my mind yet. I said, well, where's he from? He said he's from the Philippines. Well, that's great, because that's a Catholic country, and they don't like family planning. What's his name? His name is Salas. What was his level? He was a minister. I said, well, hire him. And he did. And so Mr. Salas became the first head of the UN Fund for Population Activities at the United Nations in New York. Again, I thought my job was done. But a few years later, I was appointed Deputy Director General to the International Labor Organization in Geneva, which is a tripartite organization. Secretariat consists of 3,250 people from 103 countries around the world, and worked in 120 countries. And Mr. Salas came to visit me shortly after I was appointed. And I said, well, how's it going? He said, well, I got lots of money coming in. He said, but I don't have ways to spend it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you know, these various agencies in the UN system, they don't want to do it. And so I sat down and we talked for some time at my office in Geneva. And I finally had an idea, and I said, you know, the problem is that you want to control everything, and they don't have the staff that's trained to carry out what you want to do. So I have an idea. I said, why don't you give the ILO $1 million, and I will select 6 professionals who would be delighted to pursue this idea. And they will be on your payroll, and they will report to you, but they're part of the Secretariat of the ILO. And I said, when they get trained and excited about things, they can go to all of the different parts of the ILO and explain what this is all about, and that basically it's free to them. And so why don't we try that and see how that works? And so that's what he did. And he gave the ILO $1 million, and we selected 6 terrific people who really believe in this concept of population and family planning. And they reported to Mr. Salas, but they were on our payroll, so to speak. And they really worked together beautifully. And that's how UNFPA really got launched. And it's going strong to this very day. And actually, I checked recently, and the UNFPA in these last decades has received $10 billion, $10 billion for family planning and population around the world. So this has been a great success. There's no other institution like it in the world today and is active in today's world. Thank you very much.